I never imagined that my son's college graduation would take such a turn. The ceremony at the University of Minneapolis had been flawless, clear blue skies, proud families, and an atmosphere filled with joy and accomplishment. Nathan had worked tirelessly to earn his business degree, and my heart swelled with pride. It should have been one of the most joyful days of our lives. Instead, it became something entirely different. My name is Anna, and after spending 25 years married to Benjamin, I believed I knew him well. Together, we had built a stable and comfortable life in Minneapolis, raising our son while managing our respective careers. I worked as a financial advisor, and Benjamin ran his own consulting firm. We weren't wealthy, but we had been prudent with our savings, carefully planning for retirement and Nathan's future. That afternoon, as we stood together for photographs after the ceremony, I noticed Benjamin behaving oddly. He kept glancing at his phone, his eyes scanning the crowd with an unease I couldn't ignore. His assistant, Rebecca, was also present. Officially, she was there to help coordinate the evening celebration, yet something about her presence felt unsettling. She was young, probably around 30, and had been working with Benjamin for the past 2 years. Then came the champagne toast, the moment when everything changed. As Benjamin stood up, holding his glass, I expected a heartfelt speech about Nathan's achievement. Instead, he cleared his throat, his tone carrying a weight that made my stomach twist. "I have something important to share with everyone," he declared, his voice steady but detached. I recognized that expression instantly. In my line of work, I had seen countless people attempting to mask their anxiety before making decisions that would alter their lives forever. Then, with a calmness that chilled me, he continued, "I'm leaving. Rebecca and I are in love, and we're starting a new life together. I've already transferred our savings to ensure our fresh start." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nathan's face turned ghostly pale, and the guests around us shifted in discomfort. Rebecca stood beside Benjamin with a self-satisfied smile, her hand resting on his arm in a display of possession. But where Benjamin expected to see shock and devastation in my expression, he found something else entirely: calmness. Because unlike him, I had been ready for this moment. Maybe it was because I had sensed this coming for months. Maybe it was because I had already prepared for precisely this scenario. I reached into my purse, feeling the weight of the envelope tucked inside. 3 months earlier, I had noticed the first red flags while reviewing our joint accounts. A series of transactions stood out: unusual transfers and costly hotel charges. As a financial advisor, I was trained to recognize irregularities, and these weren't random indulgences. They followed a pattern. The charges always appeared on nights when Benjamin claimed he was working late. Minneapolis wasn't an enormous city, and the same hotel name kept surfacing: the Marquette, located just 2 blocks from his office. Always on Wednesdays. Always the same suite. Instead of confronting him immediately, I took a different approach. Years of working with numbers had taught me the value of patience and precision. I began tracking every transaction, every receipt, every inconsistency. Slowly but surely, the evidence accumulated: reservations for 2 at upscale restaurants, purchases of fine jewelry from Tiffany's, first-class tickets to exotic Caribbean destinations I had never heard about. Then came the offshore account transfers. Benjamin believed he was being clever, hiding money in a Cayman Islands account. But he overlooked one critical detail: I had handled our taxes for the past 15 years. I knew every legitimate account, every investment, every dollar we had saved together. These unauthorized transactions stood out like neon signs. The final confirmation arrived in the form of a phone call from my friend Laura, who worked in HR at Benjamin's firm. Her voice was hesitant that afternoon in March when she said, "Anna, I think there's something you should know. Rebecca just submitted a transfer request to your husband's new satellite office in Bermuda." At that moment, everything became clear. This wasn't just an affair, it was an escape plan. Suddenly, the pieces fit together. The secret accounts, the hidden money, the well-timed announcement. Benjamin had chosen Nathan's graduation as the stage for his grand exit, assuming that the public setting would prevent an outburst or confrontation. What he didn't know was that I had already taken matters into my own hands. For weeks, my lawyer, Patricia, and I had been working behind the scenes. We had prepared the divorce petition, frozen our joint assets, and gathered undeniable evidence of Benjamin's financial misconduct and infidelity. I had systematically moved our legitimate savings into a secure account, ensuring that every suspicious transaction was well documented and legally accounted for. As I took another sip of champagne, I watched Benjamin bask in his supposed triumph, oblivious to the reality that his carefully planned departure was about to unravel. Rebecca, emboldened by the moment, held up a first-class plane ticket, her voice laced with smugness as she announced, "Our flight to Bermuda leaves tonight. We've already picked out the perfect beachfront home, with your savings." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the room. Nathan's hands were visibly shaking with rage, his graduation cap still sitting atop his head. Around us, family and friends fidgeted in their seats, uncertain whether they should stay or quietly slip away from the inevitable confrontation. Benjamin turned to me, his expression hovering between smug satisfaction and forced pity. "I've left you enough to cover a few months of expenses," he said with an air of generosity. "I think that's more than fair considering." "Considering what?" I cut in, my voice unwavering. "That I helped build your consulting firm from the ground up? That I managed our finances so you could focus on advancing your career? Or are you referring to the fact that I've known about your scheme for months?" His confident smile faltered for the first time, while Rebecca's grip on his arm visibly tightened. "What do you mean, you've known?" she demanded, her composed exterior showing the first cracks. Calmly, I reached into my purse and retrieved a thick manila envelope I had prepared in advance. "For someone who prides himself on meticulous planning, Benjamin, you really should have been more cautious with your email password. The one you've been using for 2 decades? Nathan's birthday? Not exactly the most original choice." The color drained from his face as realization dawned. I could see his mind racing, calculating what might be in that envelope and how much I had uncovered. "Your plan was strategic, I'll give you that," I continued, rising from my seat to face him directly. "Creating an offshore account in Bermuda, timing this announcement to coincide with Nathan's graduation, assuming I wouldn't dare cause a scene. Clever. But there's one crucial thing you overlooked about me." He swallowed hard before forcing out a question. "And what's that?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. A slow smile formed on my lips. "I don't just manage our family's finances. This is my profession. Did you honestly think I wouldn't notice the transfers? The unexplained hotel charges? The hidden Cayman Islands account?" His eyes widened with each revelation. I watched as he tried to maintain composure, but Rebecca took a step back, her previously victorious expression slipping into uncertainty. I held out the envelope. "Before you leave for your new life, you might want to take a look at this. Think of it as my graduation gift to both of you." With trembling fingers, Benjamin took the envelope and slowly pulled out the stack of documents inside. I observed in quiet satisfaction as his expression shifted from confusion to shock. The divorce petition, already filed and stamped, was the first thing he saw. It stood in stark contrast to the grand future he had envisioned. What is this?" he stammered, looking up at me in disbelief. I took a slow sip of my champagne, enjoying its crisp taste. "Just some light reading before your romantic getaway," I said smoothly. "You might want to focus on page 3. Rebecca leaned in, her manicured nails digging into his arm as she read over his shoulder. The bank statements revealed a stark truth: our shared account now had a balance of 0. Every cent had been legally transferred weeks ago into an account under my name alone. "You can't do this," Benjamin spluttered, his face turning red. "That's our money. Our money." I arched an eyebrow. "You mean the money you were planning to steal? The funds you've been quietly moving into offshore accounts?" I gestured toward the next set of documents. "By the way, the IRS is quite intrigued by your creative bookkeeping methods." As he flipped through the pages, his hands shook. There, laid out in undeniable detail, were receipts from hotels and restaurants, email exchanges outlining his affair with Rebecca, and, most damning of all, the blueprint of their plan for this very day. Each page dismantled his escape strategy piece by piece. Nathan stepped beside me, his graduation gown rustling as he moved closer. His voice was thick with emotion as he finally spoke. Dad, you were really going to do this? Today, of all days? Benjamin couldn't bring himself to meet our son's gaze. Instead, he frantically searched through the remaining pages until his eyes landed on a court order. His assets, personal and business, had been completely frozen. His hands trembled so violently he nearly dropped the document. Everything is locked down, I explained evenly. Your accounts, your business funds, and even that secret little nest egg you stashed away in the Caymans. My lawyer is quite thorough. Rebecca's self-assured expression had vanished entirely. Panic crept into her voice. Babe, what is she talking about? What does she mean? Everything is frozen. I turned to her with a look of mock sympathy. Oh, dear, it means your sponsor is officially out of reach. Well, not broke exactly, just unable to access a single cent of his fortune. I hope you kept your return ticket because that beachfront villa in Bermuda might have to wait a little longer. Around us, the assembled guests remained in stunned silence, taking in the spectacle. My friend Laura, who had played a crucial role in exposing their scheme, fought to hide a triumphant smirk behind her hand. Thomas, Benjamin's younger brother, shook his head in disapproval, his expression filled with disdain. Meanwhile, Catherine, his wife, leaned in and murmured to Anna, her tone laced with bitterness, "Well done. You've destroyed everything." Benjamin, usually composed, could no longer maintain his facade. His anger flared as he hissed at Anna, but before he could say more, she stepped forward, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "No," she countered, her tone steady, "you were the one who ruined everything the moment you chose to betray our family. I'm just making sure you face the consequences of your decisions." His grip on the stack of papers faltered, and they slipped from his hands, scattering across the floor like autumn leaves caught in the wind. Rebecca, realizing the gravity of the situation, frantically bent down to retrieve them, her face flushing with embarrassment as the truth unraveled before everyone. Benjamin's composure shattered entirely when his eyes landed on the final document, a formal letter from his company's board of directors. His hands tightened around the page, crumpling its edges as he read the contents. The letter confirmed an immediate investigation into his relationship with Rebecca, citing serious concerns about abuse of power and misuse of company resources. His voice, now hoarse with disbelief, barely rose above a whisper. "You wanted the board?" Anna's response was calm, almost indifferent. "I didn't have to," she admitted. "It turns out someone else had already taken notice of your inappropriate behavior with a subordinate. The ethics committee has been monitoring you for months." Rebecca's face lost all color. Her voice trembled as she turned to Benjamin. "What does this mean for my position?" Anna set down her champagne glass and met her gaze. "Well," she said, her tone almost casual, "I believe the proper HR term is immediate termination. And given the circumstances, I'd imagine finding another job in Minneapolis will be difficult." Benjamin straightened suddenly, attempting to regain control of the situation. His voice rose in protest. "This is absurd. I built that company from the ground up. They can't just—" "They can," Anna interrupted, her voice unwavering, "and they already have. The board is worried about potential lawsuits. Apparently, you're not the first executive to assume he could exploit his position to pursue younger employees." At that moment, Nathan, their son, stepped forward, holding his graduation cap in his hands. His expression was a mix of disbelief and disappointment. "I can't believe you did this, Dad," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "To Mom. To our family. To everything we've built." Benjamin reached for Nathan's arm, his voice pleading. "Son, you don't understand. Sometimes marriage is just—" But Nathan recoiled, pulling away before he could finish. "Don't," he snapped. "Don't try to justify this. You were planning to steal Mom's savings and run away with your assistant. And on my graduation day, no less. I understand exactly what's happening here." Rebecca, regaining her composure, clung to one last shred of hope. "Benjamin, they can't prove anything about us," she insisted. "We can fight this." A sharp laugh escaped Anna's lips. "Oh, they can prove plenty," she countered. The email thread where you both mapped out this entire plan, including today's announcement, the hotel receipts, the witness statements from your coworkers. I think that's more than enough. The once celebratory gathering had turned into a spectacle. Some guests had quietly slipped away, unwilling to witness the unraveling any further, but many remained, their expressions a mix of shock and fascination. Thomas stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on Nathan's shoulder. His voice, thick with disappointment, cut through the silence. "How long?" he asked, his eyes locked onto Benjamin. "How long have you been planning to abandon your family?" Benjamin remained silent, unwilling or unable to answer. Instead, Rebecca filled the void, her voice rising defensively. "We've been in love for 18 months. We shouldn't have to hide it anymore." Anna tilted her head, tapping her chin thoughtfully. 18 months, she echoed. "Interesting. That's exactly how long I've been collecting evidence. Every transaction, every meeting, every little deception, I had a feeling it might be useful someday." Realization dawned on Benjamin's face, and the weight of it crushed any lingering illusions he had of control. While he had been meticulously planning his escape, Anna had been 2 steps ahead, quietly assembling an airtight case against him. His perfect scheme, his dreams of a fresh start with his young assistant, the money he had hidden away, it was all slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Desperation flickered in his eyes as he tried one last time to negotiate. "Anna, let's be reasonable," he said, lowering his voice into the persuasive tone he had mastered in boardroom negotiations. "We can work something out. Split everything 50-50. Keep this civil." Anna's lips curled into a smirk. 50-50, she repeated, amusement clear in her voice. "Of what, exactly? The money you tried to hide? The company that's about to fire you? Or maybe you mean the house, which, as it turns out, is solely in my name." Benjamin's head jerked up. "What do you mean, solely in your name?" She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "Remember last month when you were too busy to attend the mortgage refinancing meeting?" She reminded him. "You just signed the papers I brought home without reading them." She let the truth sink in before delivering the final blow. "You really should pay more attention to what you sign, Benjamin. The house was transferred to my name alone." Rebecca's grip tightened on Benjamin's arm, her panic palpable. "What about the Bermuda property?" she asked frantically. "Our deposit?" Anna's response was swift and unwavering. "Frozen, along with every other transaction you've made in the last 6 months." She gave a slight shrug. "Though I imagine the property developer will be quite interested to learn those funds were acquired fraudulently." A deep rage twisted Benjamin's expression as he clenched his fists. His jaw tightened, and just as he was about to hurl a furious insult, Nathan's sharp voice cut through the tension. "Dad," he snapped. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." The remaining guests stood frozen, their silence heavy with shock as Benjamin's carefully maintained facade crumbled completely. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time, he truly appeared his age. "I've been working with your attorney, Patricia," I stated evenly. "Given the situation, she's prepared a rather generous settlement offer. You can sign it now, or we can let the court review all the evidence and make a ruling. The choice is yours." Rebecca stepped away from Benjamin, her youthful face twisting in dawning horror. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You told me we'd be secure. You said we would have everything we needed." A flicker of sympathy stirred in me. "Oh, sweetheart," I murmured. "He made the same promises to me 25 years ago. We all see how that turned out." Thomas, his expression filled with disgust, approached his brother. "The family lake house you've been looking after for Mom and Dad, have you been using it for your secret getaways too?" Benjamin's silence spoke volumes. Thomas's jaw tightened. "I'll tell them myself," he said firmly. "They deserve to know what kind of man their son really is." Nathan, still dressed in his graduation robes, squared his shoulders and met his father's gaze. Despite the storm of emotions behind his eyes, his voice remained steady. "I think it's time for both of you to leave. You've done enough damage for today." I watched as Benjamin's world imploded. The graduation ceremony, which he had chosen as the stage for his grand exit, had instead become the setting of his ultimate downfall. Everywhere he turned, there were whispers, disapproving stares, and the unmistakable look of betrayal in his son's eyes. His brother's disgust was evident, and his carefully built life was unraveling in real time. I reached for my purse. "The settlement papers will be ready at Patricia's office on Monday," I informed him. "And don't bother trying to access any accounts before then." I hesitated for a brief moment before adding, "And Benjamin? I'd suggest flying coach to Bermuda. First class might be out of your budget now." As Benjamin and Rebecca slipped away in quiet disgrace, I turned back to our guests with a bright smile. "Well, now that the unexpected entertainment has concluded, how about we celebrate Nathan's achievement properly?" Laura stepped forward, wrapping me in a quick hug. "Anna, that was absolutely masterful," she whispered. I don't think I've ever seen Benjamin at a complete loss for words. Nathan slipped an arm around my shoulders, his admiration clear. "Mom, you've been planning this for months, haven't you? How did you stay so composed?" Years of working with other people's finances had taught me patience, and I squeezed his hand as I replied, "Watching your father's schemes unravel made every second of waiting worth it." Thomas raised his glass, his voice full of satisfaction. "To Anna, for orchestrating the most well-deserved justice I've ever seen. And to Nathan, whose graduation will be remembered for years to come." Laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the air as the tension dissipated, replaced by a true atmosphere of celebration. The guests gathered around Nathan, offering their congratulations at last. Catherine, Thomas's wife, pulled me aside. "That letter from the board, you timed everything perfectly, didn't you?" I simply smiled. The ethics committee had been investigating for months. I just made sure their findings were revealed exactly when he least expected it. Timing is everything in finance. A pause. "And in payback?" As we moved the celebration to the restaurant I had reserved, definitely not the one Benjamin had originally planned, I felt an unfamiliar lightness settle over me. The weight of his deception and betrayal had lifted, replaced with a sense of triumph and long-overdue freedom. Nathan leaned in and whispered, "Best graduation gift ever, Mom." 2 weeks later, I sat across from Patricia in her downtown Minneapolis office, reviewing the finalized divorce settlement. Benjamin had signed without resistance, the fight completely drained out of him after that fateful graduation day. The company's ethics investigation had uncovered even more than I had. 3 additional young assistants had stepped forward with accounts of his inappropriate conduct. The board wasted no time terminating him, ensuring his reputation in the business world was utterly ruined. Rebecca, facing her own professional crisis, had abandoned their grand plans without hesitation. Last I heard, she had returned to Chicago, moving back in with her parents, her vision of a glamorous new life in Bermuda left in ruins. The house is secure, the assets are protected, and all evidence of tax fraud has been submitted to the proper authorities, Patricia summarized as she stacked the final documents neatly. "Honestly, considering the circumstances, this is one of the cleanest divorces I've handled." That evening, Nathan took me to dinner to celebrate. Over the meal, he studied me thoughtfully. "You know, Mom, I've been thinking about how you handled everything, so precise, so strategic. Would you ever consider doing some financial consulting for my new company?" His faith in me touched my heart. With a smile, I replied, "I might be interested, though I hope you've learned to read the fine print before signing anything." Nathan laughed. "Oh, trust me, Mom. That's a lesson none of us will ever forget." As we savored our dinner, a deep sense of peace settled over me. I realized that sometimes, true revenge isn't about settling scores, it's about growing stronger, gaining wisdom, and preparing for whatever challenges lie ahead.